to Words and Music 2023 Kickoff Night. Thank you all for being here. Number one, all y'all are too skinny and we still got a bunch of food, so please eat, drink up. The Turning Tables is behind the bar. Thank you, Turning Tables, for being here. I'm Megan. I am the director of the Words and Music Festival. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing these next 4 days and what these next 4 days ultimately support, and then I will get out of the way for the main attraction. So, Words and Music this year is held at this beautiful venue, the Andre Caillou Center for the Performing Arts. This Bayou Road is the oldest road in New Orleans, and we're really excited to bring the festival to what we feel is a part of our city's history. As you can see on the monitors, we have an incredible 4 days. Whether you love theater, you love poetry, you love music, you love nonfiction, creative nonfiction, we've got something for you. A lot of the folks that are going to be presenting over the next few days are here. Forgive me if I don't see you, this light is really bright. Brad Richard, Karen Cecile Davidson, Valentine Pierce, all at this table. All right, we're Friday and more Friday. No, wait, y'all are on Thursday. Yeah, y'all are on Thursday. She's on Friday. And then we've got somewhere Nikki Ummel's running around here. She curated the plays, The Thing. Thank you, Nikki. We got Megan Morrison, who'll be reading at the Literature and Lunch session on Friday. Shout out to Megan. Stacey Balkin is the curator of Po Boys and Poets. Stacey, thank you very much. Also got a couple other authors who are not part of the festival this year, but are amazing in their own right. We got Tracy Taylor over here. Her book N.I.E. is incredible. A.E. Rooks, winner of Best Maritime Nonfiction by the British Maritime Society. Thank you, A.E. Rooks. And thank you to Candace from Tubby Inc., who's Mid-City Bookshop, for holding it down for us and selling all these folks' books. But it's not just about these 4 days, right? Words and Music ultimately supports the nonprofit One Book, One New Orleans, which I also direct. And what One Book, One New Orleans does is we break down barriers that prevent folks from accessing books. I will not go into how we do that in detail, but find me after class and I'll be happy to go into more detail. Find me after class, yes. But basically, if your barrier is low literacy, if your barrier is poverty, if your barrier is homelessness, if your barrier is incarceration, we are there and we are breaking it down. Just this year, we have started a partnership with the Orleans Parish Jail. We're now bringing 100 books a month to keep them in a library that functions, and we started a book club inside. So that's just I counted last week, and we had given out 2,698 books. Add another 190, because I did that this week too. So, and it's Wednesday. Yeah, so whatever that number is, that's the number we're at so far this year, and we are still going to be counting and doing more counting. So when you see the little QR codes that say support the festival and the year-round work, that's the year-round work that we're talking about. Okay, so when I am not reading books and trying to figure out how to get more books into the hands of more people, I am probably listening to music. They are my two favorite things. Don't tell my children. We're supposed to be my two favorite things. It's a different level. It's a different kind of love. I love all music, but Parliament-Funkadelic holds such a special place in my heart. Their music is probably responsible for some of the deepest and long-lasting friendships in my life, so thank you, Parliament-Funkadelic, for everything you've done for me and for thousands of listeners, millions of listeners across the world. I get verklempt when I think about it. In short, when the question is, can you get to that? It's always yes. And I am so excited tonight to be here with the Authorized P-Funk Song Reference, the official canon of Parliament-Funkadelic. 1956 to 2023. Written by Danny Bedrosian, right there. He'll be up here in a minute. He is the keyboardist for P-Funk and has been for 20 years. So I've seen him multiple times, and many of those times, he and the rest of Parliament-Funkadelic have been preceded by DJ Soul Sister, who is here tonight as her alter ego, or true self, I'm not sure which, Melissa A. Weber. Melissa A. Weber is an artist, scholar, and music historian whose areas of interest and expertise include 20th century popular music, the music and culture of her native New Orleans, and archives. She serves as curator of the Hogan Archives of New Orleans Music and New Orleans Jazz, a unit of Tulane University Special Collections. As an adjunct professor, she teaches history of urban music at Loyola University, New Orleans. She's presented her work and research at meetings for American Musicological Society, International Association for the Study of Popular Music, National Council for Black Studies, and Society of American Archivists, among others. Welcome, y'all are just in time. In her spare time and under the moniker DJ Soul Sister, she has hosted her Soul Power show on WWOZ-FM New Orleans Community Radio Station for 25 plus years. As a performance DJ, she has performed with artists ranging from Questlove to George Clinton and Parliament-Funkadelic. Welcome, Melissa. Joining her is Danny Bedrosian, the keyboardist for George Clinton and Parliament-Funkadelic for the past 20 years, making him the longest tenured keyboard player in the band's history. In addition to performing with Clinton and Company, he has worked or performed with many musical icons such as Snoop Dogg, Chuck D, and Flavor Flav, Ice Cube, Shaboa Olajuwon from System of a Down, Kendrick Lamar, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Erykah Badu, Queen Latifah, Mumford & Sons, Reza, Flying Lotus, Thundercat, Sheila E., Wu-Tang Clan, and many more. He has appeared on 25 Strong, BET's Super Anniversary Special, The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, The Carson Daly Show, I'm from Rolling Stone, The Late Show with David Letterman, The Monique Show, MTV in several nations, and many more. Welcome, Danny. One last bit of housekeeping before I get rolling. All y'all who donated tonight know that in the ad for this, anyone who donates was automatically registered to win a $25 Community Book Center gift card. So if I call your name, we're going to give out 3 tonight because I'm feeling some love. Desiree Logoa, you in the house? No. Catherine Jackson? And Veronica Cross. All right, if they come on in, I will bring them a gift card. But without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Melissa and Danny and try not to break this mic in process. Thank you all for being here. I'll see you hopefully tomorrow.
Good evening, everybody. How y'all doing? We're about to get into it. You have to excuse me because I'm very excited about our conversation. And once again, we already had the introduction, but Danny Bedrosian, I call you Danny. Yeah. And I want to personally congratulate you on this book we're going to get into today. The Authorized, I have to say the whole thing, the Authorized P-Funk Song Reference, official Canon of Parliament-Funkadelic, 1956 to 2023. Before we get into the book, and before I ask you about the band, I just want to start way from the beginning. How did you get into Parliament-Funkadelic?
Okay, good question. All right. Well, this is going to lead into me embarrassing you at some point. I was a classically trained pianist. My parents were concert pianists and piano educators. They ran a piano school out of the home, and so literally hundreds of kids and their parents coming in and out of my house all week long, all day long, play piano. So there were 3 to 5 pianos playing in my house at all times. My sisters, myself, the students, my parents. And everything was immersed in music, everything. And my father was the choir director at a local church, despite being fairly secular himself, and my mother was the accompanist and organist. And so we also had to be in the choir and sing, and our whole house was 5-part harmony and all of this stuff. It was a constant in the home. And both my parents hipped me to, despite the fact that we were classically trained, Bach and all of that stuff, they hipped me to really interesting music from a very young age. So in addition to my father getting me into more modern avant-garde orchestral music like Khachaturian and Shostakovich and things like that, he also brought me to my first James Brown concert when I was 8 years old at the Lowell Auditorium in Lowell, Massachusetts. Changed my life. And not too long after that, the advent of sampling became the constant in the hip-hop world. And I had been privy to P-Funk's music via sampling. And I'd asked my best friend growing up, I said, what is this music? It was like, I think it was an Ice Cube record. And I said, what's the music though? What's the singing? What is this chorus? And he was like, oh, that's P-Funk, that's George Clinton. I said, I gotta get more of this. So from around age, I think 11, I had immersed myself in the world of P-Funk, trying to get as many albums as I could. And from age 11, I was telling the world, I'm gonna be the keyboard player for P-Funk when I grow up. And my parents and everybody else around were like, okay, yeah, that's great. Leading me a little bit down the line to age 16, this is now like early 90s, the internet is new, and I didn't have the internet yet, but I had friends who did, and I would go over their house just so that I could get on the Mother page that was run by Duke University, which was like this kind of all things P-Funk website, and the One Nation Boardroom, which was run by Miss Melissa Weber here. And yes. This was the place where the fans could really argue and fight over who played on what, and which leads also into the book a little bit. And there was a contest. You know what I'm about to talk about? No. This is amazing. So I can credit Melissa with being really the singular reason why I initially met George Clinton. She might not know this. There was a contest that was put together by Clip Payne and his wife at the time, Sarah Traeger Payne, and was administered between yourself, Gina Hall, and Marcy Garagosian. And basically, it was a contest at all the P-Funk shows around the country where you made the bed sheet for George Clinton. Back when he used to wear those bed sheets in the 90s and cut the hole in the top and wear the bed sheet. So they were looking for artistic people to design these bed sheets. And I had a little bit of artistic background. If you're a Bedrosian, there are 3 jobs that you have. You're either a pianist, you're a fine artist, or you're a Major League Baseball player. That's it. Those are the only things you can be if you're a Bedrosian. So I had some fine artists in my family, my sister, my grandfather, and we all draw. And so I made this really ornate rump of steel skin on the front and the One Nation flag on the back with aliens and lyrics and real colorful. There were very specific instructions as to the size of the bed sheet and what kind of paints to use. And I won the contest for Providence, Rhode Island, which is only a couple hours from where I grew up, being from New England. And Melissa was the one who had administered. Do you remember this?
I remember the designer sheet contest for George, and
yes.
George would wear the sheet in concert.
Yes, and so Melissa was the one who really organized this whole thing. And if it weren't for her, A, I wouldn't have known about the contest. B, I probably wouldn't have won for the city that was near me. And
because I would judge the designs that would come.
Yes.
Oh my God, this is freaking me.
So we haven't talked about that. So yeah, so Melissa, I love you for a million reasons, but that is probably the primary one. And that got my foot in the door. And I'm 16. I'm handing George the bed sheet. I'm meeting the whole band for the first time. And at this point, I had been listening to P-Funk for 5 years, and so I'm already like, this is my band, this is my favorite band, so I'm dropping them off demos, and like, here's my music, I'm singing for George live, I'm singing songs. And they were like, we love this. And it didn't happen to me until maybe 10 or 11 years ago, and I received an import copy of a live show we did in Basel, Switzerland. And I was like, this is great. I think it was a DVD too, so I was really excited to see it, because all musicians want to see themselves. They never get to see what it looks like, what that's at. And I got it, and I got up the liner notes, and it wasn't my name for keyboard, it was somebody else who was listed. Not only that, the entire lineup was mislisted, was mislabeled. So somebody had just taken a rider from another year and just copied and pasted it and made that the album. And I was like so mad. And then it happened a few more times, and I was just like, okay, no. And I'd seen it happen so many times to my bandmates, to my brothers and sisters. And I'm just, that was important to me. The third reason is, as you know, better than most, the fans, many of the most diehard fans, spend good portions of their day on Facebook groups, literally fighting tooth and nail over who played what, who sang what on these songs. And they will go down to their grave saying that it's this person, no, it's this person. So I wanted to dispel some of the myths, put some of the stuff to bed, but I also know that it's also going to open some cans of worms as well in terms of some of the answers, because some of the answers are unexpected, I should say. Some of the answers were not what I expected when I found out from primary sources, and from unanimous primary sources, not just one person. And so those are the things that help dispel the myths, but also help create conversation. And so those were kind of the main reasons why I wanted it to reach fruition, so to speak. It had initially just been for my own benefit, and then turned into something that I wanted everybody to have. So.
You mentioned die-hard P-Funk fans, but for the generalists, why is Parliament-Funkadelic so important?
Well, it's the most sampled band of all time. It's the cornerstone probably of the African-American musical experience in a lot of ways. There have been a lot of articles written in recent years about Parliament-Funkadelic has surpassed the Beatles as the most important 20th century / 21st century Western band. And while I'm not trying to take anything away from the Beatles, George himself loved the Beatles and it was an influence on him. What Parliament-Funkadelic has done culturally in terms of influence, I believe, has far succeeded what the Beatles, the Stones, even Motown have done, because it has moved into an international realm. I've played on all 6 livable continents multiple times in my 20-year tenure. The only place I haven't been is Antarctica. And hundreds of countries, and 100-something countries. And when you see the universality of P-Funk, and when you see how it breaks down age, race, gender, and all the other things that divide us, and turns them into things that unite us, it makes a much bigger impact than any one single group, whether it's the largesse of the band, the fact that it's been around so long, or the all-unifying message of one nation under a groove, and all of the messages that George has espoused over his many decades. It's 68 years of music, it's 8 decades. So the 50s to the 2020s, and there's nothing like it in the whole world. You can't compare them to another group. And if you are going to talk about other groups, P-Funk is the Kevin Bacon. They talk about 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. It's 2 degrees of P-Funk. You guys name a song or a band or any pop culture, anything, I can give you 2 degrees to get you back to P-Funk, or 1. And that's the truth. George has been all-encompassing in his mastery as a producer, a band leader, a vocalist, and the group itself has been the most influential musical collective of all time. It doesn't matter what genre you come from. It could be neo-soul, it could be techno, it could be country, it could be classical, it could be metal, it could be hip-hop, and everything in between. George not only has intercepted and used that stuff for his own creation, but he's also made mixtures of all those that don't fit in any bag that sort of define what P-Funk really is. And for those of us, and I'd say, probably 90% of us in the world feel, I'm too this for that, I'm too that for this, I'm pulled in this many directions, don't feel like you fit a very particular set or demographic. That's where P-Funk comes in. P-Funk is that. And it represents so much to so many people. And much like what they describe about, what a lot of musicologists describe about Bach, it's this transcendence. It means so much more to so many people than what any one particular person can say about it. And I think that's why it's so important overall.
Now, to get what you got in this book, you talked to so many people, and I'm going to ask you about that. But let's start with, there's two words in the title, authorized and official. So this means that George Clinton has signed off on this. So tell us about your conversations with George around this book. What does he think of it? Was he excited? Skeptical? Let's talk about George.
I mean, George, I have this, just my experience with him, he has been nothing but accepting and supportive of every endeavor I have ever brought to him. He's just always been like, let's do it. Like, that's George. That's how George is. And he'll tell you himself, you'll hear him say it in almost every interview. He goes for the music that the parents hate, and that's what keeps him young, So George is always searching for that idea that's a little unorthodox. And if anything is unorthodox, it's categorizing and canonizing this crazy collective of music. This is like, I read a really good article in Guitar Player magazine back in the 90s where they were interviewing the guitarists of P-Funk. And someone said, writing a thumbnail history of P-Funk is akin to writing a history of, say, Hinduism. And I think that's a good example, because if you know anything about Hinduism, it's a thousands-year-old religion that is constantly changing and growing. It's organic. It changes from place to place, deity to deity, culture to culture, and P-Funk is very much that. So I think the outlandishness of the idea was, yeah, let's do it, this is great, And his thing is always, it's the perfect time. He always looks at it as the perfect time. I've heard him say that so many times, because if anybody knows anything about George, he works harder than anybody. He's working right now. I don't know what he's doing. He's probably working on his new album, because he's working on a new solo album right now. And, I just had a call right before I was supposed to go on from Nona Hendricks saying, I need you and George on a call right now, we gotta do this track. I'm like, I'm about to go up and talk about this book I got coming out. And he's just constantly on the move and constantly going. And so he sees what's happening contemporaneously in the world around him with regards to what he's doing, and sees everything as a golden opportunity. So he was super supportive. I told him what I wanted to do, and he said, well, if anybody can do it, it's you. I said, okay, but I'm gonna need your help now. I said, it has to be based on primary sources. It means I'm gonna have to interview you, so come over. He wants me there more often than I'm there anyway. So he's like, come on over, And just something to keep him company, and he loves talking about the records, and he's just a great person talking about musicology and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, he'll just be painting, and then he'll be like, play the record, we'll listen. I'll have like a real obscure question, like, who played percussion on this? Let's listen. We'll listen. Eddie Bongo, the Funk Brothers. Eddie Bongo played the bongo. I said, okay, gotcha. And this is how he works, It's just moment to moment, and he loves the fact that I told him one day, I said, interview other people too. And he said, who are you interviewing? And I gave him the list of everybody. He said, this is amazing, this is great. Who else do you need? I asked him a few people, and I was really blessed because only 4 people out of all the people I wanted to interview, only 4 people either said no or didn't respond. So when it came to filling in those holes, I had to get creative. Family members, but also personal engineers. That was one thing I needed to get, okay, let me find the guy who engineered all those sessions. And I can get either the session sheets or the knowledge from that guy. Or the brother of so-and-so, he can provide me with the liner notes that weren't available, maybe, So there were situations like that, but far more often than not, the primary sources were unanimous. There were only a few cases where the primary sources didn't agree. And I can think of like maybe 6 songs where there was like a debate. And in those cases, I had to use majority rules and base it on the people that I knew for a fact were in the session when it happened and try to revert to them.
What about any challenges or surprises that came up in this process of interviewing, writing, compiling?
So challenges, I think at the beginning of me typing during the pandemic, I said to myself, what's going to be a Parliament-Funkadelic discography book? Which, if it was just that, might be 100 pages, maybe. And then after I kind of got those out of the way, I was like, well, I got to do Boogie's Rubber Band, because that's important almost, you know. Well, the P-Funk All-Stars, that's the natural evolution of Parliament-Funkadelic, that has to be in there. Well, I can't not do the Brides of Funkenstein and Parlet. Oh, I got to do, you know. And then just rabbit hole, rabbit hole, rabbit hole, to the point where now the book is everything that features a member of the band. If you're in the band, with some exceptions, and Melissa actually stumped me on a few things, so thank God there's going to be a second edition, because I did miss a couple little things. With some exceptions, if a member of the band that's in it, it's in the book. So not just the overall P-Funk family, but everything from like the Temptations, you know, stuff that had P-Funk on it, or Kendrick Lamar, or you name it, you know, from over the decades. It's in the book. So things that George produced and wrote, and things that feature the players on it, even if it's a session. All of that stuff is in there. The only things I left out, I did leave out certain things, because there were some challenges that were just too great. So, I say this in the intro, but I left out writers. And I left out writers for a couple of really key reasons. Firstly, anybody can go look online. This is something somebody can just go look. And they can go find out who the official writers are of any song. Because when albums came out, all the way back in the day, all the way through now, you got that little parenthetical, and it's got the names of who the writers are. Secondly, almost every person I talked to, when I'd say, hey, you know, who played on this? They go, first of all, I wrote that. Not so-and-so, not so-and-so. And this happened every single interview at least once. Sometimes, multiple times in each interview. So I was like, and not to say that they didn't, they probably did have some compositional authorship-related involvement. But for me, I can't be changing official writer's credits. See, now I'm like diving into some deep waters that are like up beyond my pay grade. So I left writers out. I also left out really, I mean, it seems a little silly, but hand claps are a major part of the P-Funk sound. But if you know anything about some of these sessions, the way that George and Gary Shire would run these things, they'd have people in the band, they'd be pulling people off the street, and there'd be like 30 people doing hand claps on a record. And then the next record is going to be a different 15 to 20 people. There was no way I was going to get all the clappers on these records. And it's funny because some of my primary source interviews, some of them were like, okay, now that this was me on hand claps on WWE, like I said, you know, I can't. I'll do it a couple times, but I can't just do this every song because it's just too much work. Only when the hand claps were what made the song P-Funk. Like if there was no other P-Funk members except for hand clappers, then it could be in the book. But otherwise, I left that out. And so there were several challenges, and engineers. However, in the intro, I gave a nice list of some of the most important engineers. And I also want to just give a shout out to the great, really a hero of New Orleans, the great Bob Bishop, who we sadly just lost just recently, who was the live engineer for P-Funk for 2 decades, maybe almost 3 decades. And so all the great engineers in the band's history are listed in the book, but they're not on all the songs, because if you know anything about George's process, he is going to work on a session for years. He is going to go back to it, add to it, take things away, change things. There's going to be 7 or 8 engineers working on each session, and they might have only done one day. They might have been on it for a while, and the engineer leaves, and somebody else. It was just too much work, and I knew that if I said this is who it is, there are going to be 6 other engineers being like, no, it was me. And they won't agree that the other one was on it because they only know the day that they were there. So I was like, okay, I can't do that either. So there was a few things I had to leave out. And again, the book would be double the length if I included those 3 things: writers, hand clappers, and engineers. So those were, I think, wisely kept off in order to make the book more legit. And surprises, there were a million surprises. A million surprises. I heard earlier they were playing in the house a bunch of P-Funk classics. And when I first got in, one of the songs they were playing was Free Your Mind or Your Ass Will Fall. It's a classic Funkadelic song, very early period Funkadelic. What I had found out only recently, and I had the wherewithal to put it in the book, but I had found out only recently, Martha Reeves is the one saying, "The kingdom of heaven is within." I didn't know that was Martha Reeves. You know, Martha and the Vandellas dancing in the street, Motown. That's her singing, chanting that crazy part, that female part. I always thought just one of the female backup singers with Funkadelic. That's Martha Reeves doing that. And did you know that? Because I didn't until recently. Yeah,
that is why.
It's crazy. And then there were things that were like forever. People thought this one particular song was this one particular person. Like just one example I've been making is I Bet You Never Lose My Love. Another classic Funkadelic song. There's a very classic drum part, and it starts the song. Everybody thought that was the primeval Funkadelic drummer Tiki Fullwood, who's my favorite drummer of all time. I always thought it was him. And I said to George, okay, I bet you, that's Tiki. He said, no, wait. I said, what? Smith. I said, Smith. He said, somebody Smith. I said, I'll let you know, I'll figure it out. The next day he was like, it's Andrew Smith. It's like one of the only names he didn't remember the whole thing. Like tens of thousands of songs and names. And he was like, and then the next day he remembered. And it was Andrew Smith, he played with Undisputed Truth. He played on Ruth Copeland's album along with Tiki. But that's him, it's the only Funkadelic song he played on. But these are things you would never know, because they're not in the liner notes, they're not listed, they're peripheral people that found their way on a record or on a song or on an album, but were not listed either for record label reasons, because they were already signed to another group or another label. They were like, what do they call it? Honeymooning, is that what it's called? When the session players are off playing with a different label, but they're not supposed to be, they have to go under a different name. And so that was one of those cases, but there were a million of them. And 2 other cases that I have to say that are just kind of in general. Drums is one of the most fought over things among the fans. Who played drums on these songs? And there are 3 or 4 individuals who are not drummers who played more drums than the drummers did. And Bootsy's one of them. A lot of people probably know that Bootsy played drums on Flashlight and One Nation Under a Groove and a few other things. But Cordell Boogie Monsoon, who's the bass player who really has the most tenure with P-Funk, he played the most bass of all the bassists. But he also played a ton of drums. And a lot of people don't know that that's him on I'd Rather Be With You, half of Bootsy's songs, and a bunch of prominent Funkadelic. Also Gary Mudbone Cooper, who was a great, famous vocalist, mostly backup vocalist, great tenor, did a million harmonies with P-Funk over his 40-plus year career. He played drums on a million songs too, most notably Aqua Boogie and Atomic Dog, but also a ton of other things. And a lot of people just don't know that. Or Walter Juni Morrison, who is this amazing multi-instrumentalist who had a great career of his own, who also played drums on a lot of things. If you take those 4 guys and put them together, they've got way more drum credits than some of the main drummers do across the key parts of the game.
And now it's listed. Now we know, because on the album it just lists their names. It doesn't say what they did or on what song. So it's wild. I'm going to open it up for questions, but I'm going to ask one more question. Out of all of the interviews outside of George, were there 1 or 2 that were really, really interesting that you know, for any reason?
Well, one person I have to name is a kindred spirit of you and I, Gabe Gonzalez, who was a drummer in P-Funk in the early 90s and is a massive P-Funk historian. He's the kind of dude that'd be like, you want to hear the part of Flashlight that they don't have on the record? The 7 minutes after it fades out, you want to hear that part? I'm like, yeah, what, would you have that? What is it? Yeah, let me play it for you. They're like, you want to hear this thing before the, you know, like he just has all this amazing stuff. And his knowledge, he's a Detroiter, and he was into P-Funk. He was trying to get that job when he was a little kid. And his knowledge was amazing. Another one is Michael Clip Payne, my big brother, who I've been in the band with for 20 years, who was just in so many sessions, on so many things, vocalist, producer, and he had a wealth of knowledge that was just incredible. And another one is a guy who I never played with, Carl Butch Small, who was a percussionist for P-Funk in the late 70s, but he also devised this machine. And it's something that, if any of you guys have heard the famous hand clap sound that is so like trademark of P-Funk and also G-Funk, like all the like Snoop Dogg records and Dr. Dre records and all that stuff, he made this thing with two big pieces of plywood and like a latch. And he just, I mean, it's gotta be hell on your hands. He would sit there and just bam, bam, for the claps. And that's that like heavy, you mix that with like 20 people clapping, and that's that heavy hand clap sound that you hear on Flashlight, but you also hear it on Zapp's More Bounce to the Ounce. And all of these classic records that were sampled umpteen billion times by every rapper ever. And his information was crazy because he was on so many sessions that I didn't even know about. But really, all of the guys, you know, some of the guys gave me like an hour or less. Some of the guys gave me 5-6 hours or more. And every single one of them, though, no matter what amount of time, every one of them gave me surprises and opened me up to exploration and things that I didn't know. Even with all my 30 years of studying this music and this band, even I was like, oh, okay, you know? So yeah, it was all just an amazing experience.
Yeah, well, one thing I really appreciate also about having this reference is, as you remember, in the mid-1990s, I ran a P-Funk fan site called the One Nation P-Funk page, and that included the P-Funk One Nation boardroom.
Yeah.
And all of these hardcore fans, they could tell you who played a tambourine or a kazoo on every record, but when it came to the women's voices and the women's participation, nobody knew and nobody cared. And now we have a book that documents the women artists also.
I'm super proud of that because they were very unwisely left off of the Hall of Fame induction.
Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction. And also, along with many other deserving people, were left off of getting certificates when we all got the Lifetime Achievement Grammy. Several of us, but the women who were so key, part and parcel to this experiment that is the P-Funk, were left off, unfortunately. And I have to thank specifically, I'm glad you mentioned them, George, Clip, and then the women themselves, because I have Dawn Silva in there, Jeanette Magruder, Sheila Horn, and several other key members of the group, female singers, that were such a big, important part. And you know, I'm the hugest Pat Lewis fan. And Pat Lewis has been working with George since like 61, and in 1961, and she still does sessions with him all the way up to today. You know, so these people are not some little side note. These are like massive, massive players that contributed a whole lot to this great work, this great body, this great work of art. So yeah, I was really happy with how the backup singers was one of the biggest challenges, by the way. If you look at the average record, there's like 15 backup singers on almost every one of these. And people like George, Clip, Mudbone, and the females that I listed from the Brides and Parlette, They were instrumental in giving me the exact lineups of who it was on those sessions. Oh yeah, I wasn't there, I had just left for a year, that's so-and-so, and it's this person and this person. And again, it's these just impeccable memories, and they were just unanimous. They all fit together. If I asked 6 people the same across, 500 different songs, who the backup singers were, it was all unanimous. It was crazy. So I'm really, really proud that that's a big part of what makes this authorized, is the inclusion of the correct female backup singers on these records.
Thank you for that. And it's wild. Every time I open this, there's a bombshell, and I can't give it away because then why would you get the book? But I will share one that I just thumbed through before I came up here, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding. So it said, The Message, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five.
Yeah.
So Dennis Chambers played drums on that?
Yep.
Dennis Chambers of P-Funk?
Yep.
Mind blown. Okay, let's open it up for Q&A. It's Q&A time. So that our video recording can capture your question, I'll ask you, and so you don't have to come up and get the microphone. If you have a question, raise your hand and say it, and then I'll repeat it, and then we'll do it like that. Any questions? I hope so. Yes.
I'll have a question, but it's awfully specific, so I feel like I'm being exactly that person from the chorus. But you mentioned the hand claps, and then you mentioned the hand clap machine, and then my mind immediately went to Everybody's Gonna Make It this time. And so now I want to know, was that a machine or was it people?
So the question was, the hand claps on Everybody's Gonna Make It this time, was it the hand clap machine or was it people? That is specific.
I told you. I was like, I'm being exactly the person that we were just talking about. I'm sorry.
If there are hand claps on that record, they're at the very end.
They're in the chorus.
In the chorus? Yeah, just the chorus. Yeah. Oh,
That
you're talking about Open Our Eyes.
No, Everybody's Gonna Make It.
Everybody's Gonna Make It, okay. Well, and Everybody's Gonna Make It, that would be, the interesting thing about that record specifically is it's on the America Eats Its Young album. And it's the only song on America Eats Its Young that is the original Funkadelics. So that was a leftover track that either didn't make it on Maggot Brain or maybe was a little too late to be on Maggot Brain. And by the end of that album, several members of the band had already left. Tal Ross had there's a famous story about Tal Ross overdosed on acid and was in like an acid-induced thing for like 30 years. This is like the last one of those records from that period where it's the original 5 Funkadelics. Of course, George Clinton on lead vocals. And actually, now that I think of it, it might have been Gary might have already taken Tal's place on rhythm guitar. Yeah, he might have actually already taken his place. But whatever hand claps are on there, 99.9% chance that it is the backup singers on that record who are Scheider, Calvin Simon from the Parliaments, and a group called Dr. Music. They were a Canadian guy and girl. You know Dr. Music?
No.
Diane Brooks and Steve Kennedy. Diane Brooks was an alto singer with George, and Steve Kennedy was this baritone. They were from Toronto. And they sing backups on a lot of the songs on America Eats Its Young, like If You Don't Like the Effects, Don't Produce the Cause, You Hit the Nail on the Head, and Everybody's Gonna Make It. Chances are it's those guys literally just clap, because the claps aren't very pronounced on that record. They're probably just clapping while they're singing the backup. So, not super pronounced.
Yeah, that's the kind of going in nerdy questions P-Funk fans engage in. But if you're not to that level, that's another thing I love about the book, because you give context about several key albums to just kind of place it historically, musically.
Yeah, yeah. Like so, if it's a song that charted, there's a nice little paragraph about it. You know, a nice little write-up about all the songs that were singles. Every single that made it on the charts has a write-up, and every band. The book is made up. It's set up chronologically by band.
Welcome.